the top 10 baits at catching sheepshead. That's what we're talking about today. I get a ton of questions from y'all asking what are the best baits out there that people can use to go out and catch sheepshead. If y'all follow the channel, y'all know that I've used everything from the conventional baits like crabs and shrimp to worms, crickets, and even corn to catch sheepshead. And today we're going to be ranking those 1 through 10. What are the best baits out there to catch these fish? Now with that, we're going to be talking about 5 conventional baits and then 5 unconventional baits, but we are going to be ranking them 1 through 10. And to kick this off, we're going to start with number 1, the absolute, without a doubt, best bait to go out there and catch sheepshead is going to be fiddler crabs, right? That's probably not a shocker to any of y'all. 100%, if y'all want to go out there and put limits of sheepshead in your boats, go out there, find you some fiddler crabs. That is the best bait on the planet at catching sheepshead. Moving on from fiddler crabs, we're going to go on to number 2, and that is going to be mud crabs, right? You typically don't find mud crabs in any stores, tackle shops, bait shops, anything like that, but they're relatively easy to find, especially in the colder months. If you just go out there and walk around the marsh, if you can find any kind of driftwood, rocks, or anything like that, typically if you're flipping rocks, you'll be able to find mud crabs, and those work almost just as good as fiddler crabs. I do prefer a fiddler crab. I feel like they move more in the water, but mud crabs will also definitely get it done for y'all. And then moving on to number 3 is going to be live shrimp, especially up here on the upper Gulf Coast. If we're not able to get fiddler crabs and mud crabs, if the tackle shops do carry live shrimp, a sheepshead will just about eat a live shrimp just as quick as it will a crab. And then in some cases, I have found that shrimp have worked better than crabs, but 9 times out of 10, crabs are better. That's why shrimp is going to be placed at number 3. Moving on from the shrimp, we're going to go to number 4, and that is going to be a barnacle. Now, with that being said, barnacles are the most natural bait that these sheepshead eat all the time, right? That is 90% of their diet is barnacles. The only reason that barnacles is ranked number 4 is that they're a little bit harder to rig up and hook and drop down. Trying to get that hook to feed just perfectly through a barnacle can be a little frustrating. On the upside though, barnacles are free. You know, you can go out and scrape them off any bridge piling, any dock piling, get out there, get you some free bait that is going to be able to put limits of sheepshead in the boats or kayaks for y'all. So yeah, barnacles is number 4. Moving on from that is going to be oysters. Got to put number 5, oysters. You probably, I would say some of the biggest sheepshead I've ever caught have been on oysters. The big problem with oysters is, one, if you're wanting to buy them, they're a little bit more expensive, but typically they are readily available at any seafood shop. You can get them in the can. They are a little bit more expensive. If you do want to harvest your own, you have to be careful with regulations because sometimes oysters aren't in season. And if they're not in season or you don't have the special licenses, it is illegal to just go up to a piling and start using oysters for bait and stuff like that. So for those reasons, it is number 5. And then also, it is a little bit harder to keep them on the hook, in my opinion. The sheepshead rob them a lot easier. There are some tricks you can use to use oysters and make them more effective. Some people use pantyhose. They shove the oysters in pantyhose and then wad them up, put them on a hook. Anyways, oysters is going to be number 5 on the list. So those are the 5 conventional baits, right? All 5 of those things are in the regular diet of a sheepshead. Those are things that the sheepshead are very familiar with smelling, seeing, and eating. But moving on from that, we're going to talk about the 5 unconventional baits that I would say work pretty doggone good to catch sheepshead, and I have used every single one of these baits and have caught plenty of sheepshead on them before. So of those, we're going to go ahead and rank number 6, which would be number 1 of the unconventionals, is going to be live worms. I have used live worms a ton to catch sheepshead. I even got some underwater footage of sheepshead eating worms and me catching them. So yeah, worms are very, very cheap. They're pretty much available in most any Walmart or freshwater tackle store. You can get them just about anywhere in any state, and they're only about $3 for a can of them. And not only that, they stay on the hooks really, really well. And when you drop that worm beside a piling, that worm's gonna move, especially with that salt water. It irritates them. They move around a lot. Those sheepshead key on them really easily, and they definitely love to eat them. So number 6 is going to be worms. Moving on from the worms, next is going to be crickets. In my opinion, crickets are the closest thing that look like crabs but are not crabs in the water, right? I typically get a can of crickets, and I'll probably put 2 or 3 of them on a single hook, drop them beside a piling. They're moving around, they're tiny, and yeah, sheepshead love to eat them. Just like the worms, they're also pretty cheap. They're not as easy to find, but if you have tackle shops that sell live crickets, get you some live crickets, drop them beside pilings, because they do work at catching sheepshead. I've even caught big black drum on crickets as well while I was sheepshead fishing. Number 8, we're getting a little bit weirder with this stuff, right? So number 8 is going to be canned hominy, right? So hominy is kind of in the corn family, I guess. It's a grain, and they look really, really close to barnacles, and they're tiny, right? So when you drop that hominy beside a piling, you sit there, leave it there long enough. If a sheepshead sees it, they get real, real curious. They'll come in there and they will eat that hominy. The downside to hominy is that they don't stay on the hook very, very well. But the upside to that is that you get about 1,000 baits. I would say at least a couple hundred baits for 99 cents for a can of hominy. So yeah, go out there, try you some hominy. They do work, and that is number 8. Number 9 is going to be corn. So y'all seen me use corn out there catching sheepshead before. I think you know, especially when I'm in dirtier water, if I can drop that yellow corn, it's something that's a little bit brighter, kind of glows a little bit better in the water. Those sheepshead are, like I said with the hominy, very curious. They're moving around those pilings. If they see that corn suspending beside a piling, they get curious and they will eat it. But much like the hominy, they don't stay on the hook very well, but they are very cheap, and you get a lot of baits per can. The only reason I didn't put these ahead of hominy is that I feel like hominy, being that whiter, grayer color, looks closer to a barnacle, and I do think that the hominy will work better than corn in the long run. And number 10 is one of the latest videos that I dropped. It's gonna be black-eyed peas. So just like the hominy, black-eyed peas look very, very close to a barnacle, real, real tiny. Put them on small hooks, drop them beside the piling. Those sheepshead are curious. They're circling around. When they see that tiny little thing that looks like a barnacle or rock hanging beside a piling, they get curious and they eat it, right? The only reason that I didn't put it ahead of the corn or the hominy is because they do not stay on the hook really well. They fall off. I've gotten to where I'm taking like 4 or 5 of them, mashing them together, and kind of, you know, getting it to where they don't break up as easy. I am going to be playing around a little bit more with the black-eyed peas, because I think if I can get them to stay on the hook a little bit better, I think they can be really, really effective at catching these fish. But anyways, that is the top 10 baits to go out there and catch sheepshead. Real quick, I do want y'all to comment if there's anything I missed or something that y'all think should be added to this list. Please drop me a comment. I'd love to see y'all's feedback and kind of see how y'all would categorize or organize these baits on this list. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. Y'all go out there, catch a ton of sheepshead, and we will see y'all in the next one.